never can quite get used to that. It's not a mirror.
We're live.
We're live? Okay. So the topic this morning is, I thought up about 20 minutes ago. This is spiritual friend. The Sanskrit for that is kalyanamitra, and it means companion in the virtue, technically. And basically, it's just, simply put, it's just saying you, in our tradition, the Buddhist tradition, down through the centuries, the three jewels, or the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the example of somebody who was, I like to say, sane, no longer at war with anything. No longer at war with anything. That's quite a statement. The Dharma, the truth that he taught, everything is dependently arisen. Nothing comes from its own side as an individual self, even though it may feel like it. And the Sangha, or the community of practitioners. In the old days, monks, nuns, modern times, it's anybody who's studying the Buddha's Dharma, or Buddha, Dharma, awakened truth. What was the awakening about? Nothing is separate. Once that's done, you're done for. You don't have anything else to do except just make a sandwich. Did anybody see Bad Santa? See it several times, please. There's a little boy in there that says, "Can I make you a sandwich?" It's a great movie. Silly, but great. So, companion of the virtue, or spiritual friend, or one who is helping you with your spiritual path. Much different than a mundane path. The mundane path is, there are very high levels of a mundane path, but the mundane path is more materialistic, more about trying to get better so you can be this or be that, or know how to make cabinets or make altars, know how to do things. It's there's the ground, path, and fruition there, or the ground is you need something. The path is you learn how to do that, and the fruition is you have what you set out to get or make. And the ground, path, and fruition, or the threefold logic of the spiritual path, is suffering is the ground, meditation, and all the other practices and study, working with the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, is the path, and the fruition is realization or awakening. And again, what do we awaken to? Nothing is separate. What was perceived as separate, and I'm here and you guys are there, and I'm doing well, you're not doing so well, and all the other divisions we set up, they're just, it's so magnetic. The minute we have any kind of difficulty with anything, we immediately want to attribute a cause. And there is a cause. That's why it makes it so difficult. There is, someone did disrespect you, or did take your money. So the reality of it is, that's why it's so challenging, is because relatively speaking, things do come and go and bounce off from each other, and some things do really well, some things don't do so well. So to transcend that, one needs to see the underlying or basic truth, the underlying, the ultimate reality of the situation. So that's what you're waking up to. You're not waking up to a wonderful feeling of bliss where you're at one with the universe. That's more like a high-flying ego. That kind of thing can happen, and it can be exhilarating. This is why people want to do drugs, is because it takes all the stuff we call the sensorium, and it fluffs it up. Thank you for coming to my talk. And when we say fluffs it up, it just means that it finds the mechanism, and chemically or whatever, puts something in it to make us feel really good for a short period of time. And we even might come down out of that and say to our friends, oh my gosh, you've got to do ayahuasca. Well, if you talk to 15 people who have done ayahuasca, you'll find that no two people have the same experience. All of them have totally, it's almost like you're doing something else. Other kinds of hallucinogens or things that change consciousness are more similar. So in order to be able to see how to do this, it seems that we need help from someone. This is in our structure in the Buddhist path. We have the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Again, the person who understood what he or she understood, and the group of people that are trying to get that. We could say figure it out, but that's not how it works. There's a little bit of figuring, but the further you go, you see that all the tools that you used to figure things out with are left behind, and eventually you have no clothes, you're barefoot, and you're going up something through a mountain path in the dark. Doesn't feel very good. So you pull out your post-it note, and your teacher, your kalyanamitra says, keep going. Journey without goal. The goal orientation is more of a materialistic approach. That's not wrong. It's just a you could say a lower level of working with the world. You know, I want a sandwich. I've got to go to the store and get some bread. I've got to get something to put on the bread. So there's some kind of something we have to do. I want to teach at a university. We have to go and do all the work it takes to get the credential to allow us to teach in the university, or to work, you know, in a hospital, or do all the other things that we do, all the study that you had to do in order to be able to have this facility here and understand how to go about doing this. So we're not discounting any of that, and just saying that spiritual path is about not leaving that, but you still have your feet on the ground. You're still here. You still do all the practical things, but your understanding completely goes beyond all of that. It goes so far beyond it that you're not particularly intimidated by anything anymore. You never have, as ego does, have the feeling that there's something I don't quite get, there's something I don't quite know. You understand the nature of knowledge rather than you feel like you have, you're a know-it-all. So the spiritual friend, if he or she is realized, and there are people who may set themselves up that way, and they may not all pass the sniff test. You know what I mean? There's something good, they sound good, but there's something about it that's a little off, a little pretentious, or a little bit too civilized, shall we say it that way? So I often say you shouldn't do this path, you shouldn't do this unless you have to. You shouldn't come this direction unless you have to. I'm not saying there's some kind of insanity about it. I'm saying you look at it and you have a chat with yourself about it. And do I want to do this or not? And I say don't do it unless you have to. But that doesn't mean don't check it out, don't look at it. You can't really know what you're stepping away from unless you first step towards it a little bit. And let's see what this is. This is why I often say, do this practice for a while. Do sitting practice of meditation. Go take the opportunity, as we were just doing a little while ago, to sit down, look at the wall. I'm gone. The teachings are gone. The building actually will disappear if you sit there long enough, and eventually there's just your mind coming and going, coming and going. Your thoughts come and go. Your thoughts come, and some of them are very nice, and thoughts go. And some of them you wish they'd stay because they felt pretty good. I often use the image or the metaphor for a sky and clouds. Your mind is like the sky. It's like a big blue sky. So if nothing happened there, you just have a big blue sky. But then clouds come, Clouds go, dark clouds, light clouds, rainbows come and go. Nothing lasts. You could say, except the sky, because the sky isn't anything. So something that is not actually something can't disappear. But if your identity is with the cloud, then as the cloud goes, you're going to be heartbroken. Or as more clouds come, you're going to be overjoyed. Relative situation happening. And again, not trying to take that away, but it's just the idea of going through that, but having a wide or a big idea of what that is about, rather than clinging to that or putting all of our hopes onto something. It's called spiritual materialism. So the sitting practice of meditation, sitting down, and the way I like to say it is we're stretching the awareness, stretching the awareness. It's backwards, isn't it? We're stretching the awareness so that when we get up off the cushion, not so much that any great thing's going to happen there. Even if you had were a blue sky, you wouldn't know it, because a blue sky can't know itself. Or maybe it could. It's difficult to understand that, to find that on your own, because we're so accustomed to going in circles, which was called samsara. We're so accustomed to being kind of intimidated by the spaciousness of our own mind. We have more and more space, and what does the ego do? The self-centered part of the mind, that aspect of the mind that thinks there's a self, thinks there's an other, which there is not. That part of the mind wants results, wants something. And it will take anything that's happening and make something out of it. I sometimes say, whatever occurs, don't add. If it's very, very difficult stuff, don't add. Don't interpret, don't label, don't do anything. But if you do that, then just observe that part of it. That's the path part of it. You actually slowly back off from interpreting anything that happens, and just have a willingness to just, whatever it is, that's what it is. Just this, as it is, as it is. It's called suchness. It's not something you create, it's something that you awaken to. So, a spiritual friend, this person will meet you if they are genuine, will meet you where you're at. And the only way that you can actually meet someone where they're at is to have a very good understanding of where you're at. Because if you don't, then whatever arises in front of you in the form of the other person, their ideas, their opinions, their judgments, you will add on to it. And you will cover it up, you will project on your own idea about what's happening with them. You will think they're crazy. Or you will think they're not doing so well. You'll think they need therapy. You'll think they should go and have get some drugs, or you think they should meditate more. You think. We add on. And actually, you are looking at your own mind. The teaching person knows that. They know that anyone that comes in front of them is a mirror. So, the one who doesn't realize that or understand it will try to correct that. They don't realize that it is a mirror. How is it a mirror? It's just a way of talking about no separation. You actually see yourself everywhere you look. Kind of like magic. Same thing is true with Sangha, or spiritual friends, that community of people who are all working with this, coming from their own karma, their own causes and conditions, the kind of things that they've gone through, not only in this lifetime, but lifetime after lifetime, that's brought them to this very position of time and space where here we are, here you are with other people, and I sometimes say, and I'm saying again, that Sangha is not as often not people you would pick to be a friend. And in other cases, it's exactly what the person, the chemistry is there. You actually meet the whole world if you have a Sangha. If you meet every kind of situation or karma, person, types of confusion. It's kind of like going into a hospital. Yes.
Can you have a spiritual friend that is not specifically in your Sangha?
I'm not saying you can't. I think anything is possible. But I think that the Buddhist teachings are set up this way based on this is how it seems to look, to fundamentally serve people, is to offer them that kind of a form. The Buddha, in this case, I'm functioning as a representative of that person or that teaching. And I'm not that person specifically. I'm not competing with anyone, but I'm setting up doing that. And then the teaching is what's happening here, and the people that are listening and asking questions of the Sangha. So difficult to have. I'm not saying you can't have a spiritual teaching person somewhere else. There might be some combination of things, but it's probably not exactly Buddhism. It may be a spiritual path. There could be some other way of doing this. There are all kinds of paths. Shamanism is a very specific kind of path that has. That is probably as different from one shaman to the next. Just the basis there is just the reality of the spiritual realm. So I'm not sure if you have more question about that.
Well, what about maybe this person doesn't say I'm a Buddhist, but they have a sense of no separation. They have a way that that really does represent a lot of Buddhist principles, and they reflect that to you, and if you gather from them those kinds of, you feel from them, you learn from them, those kind of ideals and concepts, even though they're not under the exact umbrella of Buddhism, but they can reflect those kinds of principles.
Yeah. So what's the question?
Is that a spiritual friend?
Sure. And then that leads me into another way of talking about this. You can have several levels of that. You can have the spiritual friend, the person who is teaching you on a level of more like a parent, someone who is telling you what to do and how to do this and when to do it and how to, practice. It's more that kind of situation. And then the further you go on the path, then you have, that's why it's called companion in the virtue, is then you have someone who is more like somebody walking beside of you, talking to you, rather than someone who's back telling you things to do. So, and we also have to think of the cultural context that this kind of thing happens in. In our culture, it's so amazing. It's so mixed up. It could happen on any kind of level for any kind of time. You might, a person might talk to one person or treat one person more as a child. And we're not talking about childish. I'm just talking about the teaching person will relate to them where they're at and work with them where they're at. Meet them where they're at. If you meet someone where they're at, you won't know what to do. If you know what to do, you've not met them where they're at. So yeah, I would say that's a possibility. I wouldn't necessarily call it Buddhism, even though it might echo some of the Buddhism doesn't have a corner on the truth. Buddhism is just, the truth is, if you look at any, especially non-theistic spiritual path, whether it's shamanism, whether it's Taoism, or Advaita, in different forms of Hinduism, depends, there's so many ways, but the fundamental truth is not separate. You could positively put there's only one reality, not 15. But the layers are in there can be so complicated that it looks like there's some kind of relative truth that we can do and some kind of relative truth that we can get to, and another one we can do, like heaven and hell is a really intense one that, theistic approaches use that to try to kind of frighten people out of that difficulty into some kind of loyalty to some kind of higher principle. Not incorrect, not wrong, just a way of working with people's minds.
I'm complete, thank you.
You can have questions if there are any, yes.
I recently read a translation of Tathagata as being one who's coming and going.
Tathagata.
Say it one more time.
It comes from the Sanskrit word ta-ta-ta, which means just this. So one who comes just this. No past, no future, just here. Never extending in any direction other than just this. So Tathagata, one who comes thusly.
So yes. Is there any going along with the coming?
Actually, there's nothing happening there. But that's from the, and again, a relative way of talk. We have to open our mouth. We have to use words. Something has to rattle here, make a sound. That, you know the thing. It happens like that. So we have to say something, but there's no coming and going. This is why His Holiness the 16th Karmapa on his deathbed in 1981 in Chicago said to the Vajra Regent Ursula Tenzin, nothing happens. He didn't mean, he's not taking away what's happening. But if you see no separation, then nothing is happening. More.
When you were describing the mind as the sky and the clouds coming and going, if that's true for as we sit, what is coming thusly?
Are you talking about the sitting practice? Are you talking about the Tathagata? Tathagata represents is an epithet for the Buddha, the teacher, the realized teacher. Yes.
But that's not separate than what you've talked about in terms of the mind?
Nothing is separate. But we have, as soon as I talk, then we've separated in order to talk. You have eardrums, and I'm making noises. And those resonate, and then they trigger certain things, and it's a combination of things that is extremely complicated, out of memory, in the Yogacara tradition, out of the 8 consciousnesses. And we just break it down so we can understand it, but fundamentally everything is all happening at the same time.
So what is thusly?
It's just a way of saying nothing else. It's just nothing extra. There isn't anything but this. And if you think there is, you'll suffer, because you'll either want to get away from it or you'll want to get to it. So one who is completely present, it really isn't a present, because present is as opposed to past, or a present opposed to future. But one who is actually present won't know it. If you think you're awake, you are deluded. If you think you are deluded, you are deluded. Sorry, couldn't go there. But actually, what the Buddha awoke to was delusion. He awoke to incredible delusion. This was his awakening. He didn't awaken to awakening, he awoke to delusion.
So when you say just observe, is it important to know what you're observing?
Somewhat. The just observing is a way of kind of helping through a couple of words, or one word, disentangling you from the thing that is arising. Because generally, whatever arises, we tend to attach to it by rejecting it, or attach to it by grasping it, or attach to it by shutting away, distracting ourselves from it, separating ourselves, creating more distraction. But he or she who is just observing is eventually, maybe not that moment or 10 minutes from now, is eventually will see that they're not separate from anything that happens. When you begin to see that, there's no more warfare anywhere. Even by the most intense war that comes at you, you won't fight with it. This doesn't mean that you won't stop them. We're not saying that you're crazy and you're going to let the world eat you alive. You will fight with it, but there will still be might fight back, but it will be coming out of awareness, not out of some kind of right and wrong, or they shouldn't be doing this, I'm the right person, I have to save everybody. Or further questions? Ann?
So, when someone's in front of me and I see
Yeah.
them as a mirror, so one way of thinking about that is, oh, I know exactly how you feel because I've had that experience. What is a more skillful way of understanding other as being reflective as a mirror?
The path part of it, or the way to practice it, is just stay in your senses, which means don't get rid of the mind, the sixth sense, sixth, seventh, and eighth sense. Don't get rid of it, but don't just, affiliate yourself just with the thoughts and everything. Just stay in your senses. Don't forget gravity. Don't forget the color of someone's. If you're talking to someone, just be aware of the color of their clothing. That'll take you. Take you away from the attachment to the thought patterns. We don't want to get rid of thoughts. It's our life. It's part of our life. But to totally out of hope and fear, hope that we're going to be able to help this person, or fear that we're not going to be able to understand, or fear that they're not going to let us help them. I mean, there's so many different kinds of hopes and fears, but all of them are about wanting things to be different than they are. Very important to realize that whatever's occurring is exactly what needs to occur. If you think otherwise, then you'll just go in circles. It's not wrong, it's just that you'll be sucked into that vortex we call samsara. We're not trying to get rid of samsara, we're trying to understand it fundamentally, see what actually is that. Yes.
So then is empathy delusional?
No. If someone is having difficulty, we immediately empathize with that. The one that I use quite often is if you, the kind of instantaneous empathy that comes out of your sense consciousnesses is someone is a child, on a skateboard and they fall and hit the cement on their knees. You feel that. It will actually startle you. You're seeing it happen, but you feel the visceral quality of what that would be like because you have nerve endings too. It's very much about the nerve endings.
No, so I just, based on her question, I'm talking, when you're looking at someone and feeling like, oh, I know what that feels like, I've been through that experience, and then
Okay, so I'll help you here.
Yeah.
So what you just said is extra. You follow me? So being there and having empathy come up, don't cover it up with explanations like, I've been there before, I know what this is like. As soon as you do that, you're backing away from the actual empathy. And it's, if you actually really feel empathy, you will be speechless.
I guess that would probably be more the question, then when you start looking at that and backing away, then it becomes delusionally moved away.
Then it becomes, then you're kind of abandoning them in a sense. If you're actually with them, you won't know it as a self who knows something other. Okay. Further questions?
What's happening in the moment when you should, you would assume you might feel that and you don't?
Well, it's the assumption comes up as extra thoughts about something. So it's like something is happening, something is happening here, and since it's not, say, living up to your expectations, something happens, and you notice you're not feeling what you thought you should. So that right there is actually moving you right away from the situation is still, it's probably morphed into something else by now. But now you're wound up with your, let's see, I shouldn't have, but I noticed I'm not doing that anymore. Now I wonder what that means, that I'm not having this. If someone who has a really powerful, strong, substantial awareness practice, those kind of things will still happen, but they won't be fueled. They won't get any, there won't be no fuel lines running out of that into some other open fear or wishing that you were better, or trying to change yourself into something. It's very difficult to be genuine because the beginning of feeling genuine is to feel how big and lunky and clumsy your ego is. Just to feel like you're never going to get rid of this guy, or this, you think you're making a little progress, and then you notice that your mind is just all caught up in passion, aggression, ignorance, jealousy. Yes.
Sometimes though there's
Faking, yeah.
to, you know, to connect with that person.
Yeah.
But inside there's
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. So what's your question?
Is the nothing the awareness?
Well, the nothing is empathy. But it's a kind of empathy that transcends the empathizer and that which who is being empathized with. So it's not shutting down. If you're there, if you're present, and there's a feeling of emptiness happening there, then I'm not saying that's like a goal. It's something you should try to. But you should just be there. Whatever arises is what needs to arise, and that's a difficult area because then the ego mind or the self-centered mind wants to know, okay, what's up here? Okay, what's this is about? I used to feel really empathetic, and now I'm feeling like I'm, give a crap about anybody. It's your problem, kind of thing, which is added on, of course. But the important thing is to stay with whatever arises, and if you add to it, just notice that. If you take away from it or subtract or judge it, just notice that. If you try to shut down to distract yourself, those are the three poisons. So, and this is what, coming back to the spiritual friend, this is what, this is what's happening here. I'm endeavoring to respond to your question in a way that'll be helpful to you. Not one that'll make you into somebody else, but one that will help you go deeper into who you are. Find out who you are. That's the basic question. Was beyond all the other ideas and preconceptions of ourselves and judgments of ourselves and others. It seems to be necessary to just go down into that. It's called a spiritual path, and it goes this direction. I'm not saying we're doing something out here, but the basic inquiry is this direction. Who is this? Who am I? What is this? What is this feeling? What is this? Rather than come up with some kind of explanation for it, to actually go into the emptiness. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. The same is true of feeling, perception, concept, or memory, and consciousness. This is the Heart Sutra that we just did. It's a basic teaching that's just saying that anything that occurs is empty of anything you lay onto it. And until you see that, you, me, anybody will continue to kind of take that and make it into that. Take this and make it into that. This must mean, that must mean, next thing you know, you're 15 laminations away from the reality that was completely offered to you in the moment, in that moment. There's only this moment. Go further into that. It's a good question. It's, this feeling of, for a while you're feeling very empathetic, and then you notice that you're in a situation where you kind of expect to feel that, and it doesn't happen. Instead, you're just looking at rocks and stones and trees, and you just don't have any comment on it. You haven't left the room. The person is still there, suffering. They're still having their difficulty. But you're having a kind of openness or clarity that the ego mind is terrified of. Self-centered mind does not want to fill that with purpose, reasons. It wants to bring it out of the spiritual realm. And I'm not giving you a credential here, because what you're talking about is path. Because eventually it all comes back and that's completely loaded up. Everything is so thick you can't hardly walk through it. But you have to go into the emptiness first. If you can't go into the emptiness, you can't come back into this world and function. Because to come back into this world and function, you have to eat and sleep and walk and be a human being. Yes.
You said everything is just this moment. What is this moment?
It's the opposite of all the other moments. It's a relative situation. It's just a way of trying to encourage each of us to stay with whatever's occurring. If you see it, you'll see there. You can actually see there isn't any past and future. It's an illusion. It's a hell of a good one. I mean, whoever pulled that off, I don't know where she's at, but she needs to come in here and answer for this. So it's illusory. It's not that it isn't happening, that it isn't something there, but the profundity of it comes from seeing there isn't anything but this world as it appears. Everything that appears is the Buddha or is awakened truth, not a person. It's you're awake and it's true and you're here, and there are the causes and conditions that are normally thought of as cause and effect. Those are no longer separate and no longer are happening in apparent time. Here's this, hasn't happened yet. Oh, here it comes. Get ready. Time. But it's an illusion. It's an incredibly amazing illusion. And it's not about getting rid of that, it's about seeing what it is so that you realize it's both time and not time. It's not two. And the not two-ness extends everywhere, infinitely. There, you can look down at the floor and you can look up infinite space in a matter of, how long does it take? Solid earth, empty sky. Empty earth, solid sky. Not two. Realize it. And how do you do that? Train your mind. Sit down with the help of a spiritual friend. Those of you who relate to me as a teacher, you have to give me permission, and I will do everything, including kick your ass if it shows up. And someone else, may just be very, very tentative and very soft. Another person, may have to knock you over, and I don't mean physically hurt somebody. I don't mean that. I mean but function. It's not something that the kalyanamitra or the spiritual friend does, but it's something they are. And so if you get around, as Trungpa Rinpoche once said, if the spiritual friend is like a fire. Get too close, you get burned. Don't get close enough, you don't get enough heat. So it's like that, and the relative situation functions that way. And this is also true with Sangha. The Sangha, these are spiritual friends or companions on this path. And as I've said a few minutes ago, you're going to have people you're extremely close to and people that you're very distant from. And when I say distant, just, it's hard to even see that they're even practicing. You might even say that they're not practicing what you're practicing. There are people who will never step this direction, who are functioning in a way that is completely valid, and it's a spiritual path for them. But you just talked a little bit about that. But I like I say, don't do anything unless you have to. If you're doing something that you aren't really pulled into through your intellect, your understanding, it's something you're not grokking on some level. I don't understand all of it, but I know I have to do this. That will come up in your mind. If it doesn't, do something else. See you in 3 lifetimes. And that's as close as I can get to literal, because it's like that. I've been doing this forever. So have you. I'm here and a few people in the room, and we're all together. We've gotten together with this kind of a structure that's 2,500 years old. Might as well be 10 minutes. And to use the structure to look deeply into the mind. It's very difficult to do this without some kind of a structure. Quite often people come and, I like the meditation, meditation's good and I feel better, but I don't really care for all that stuff. And I respect that, but I would never try to get somebody to do it, unless they're a student of mine. That's different. They actually ask me, yes, I want to be your student and I want your help. Okay, then do this and do that and do this. It's not like I want to be a boss, but you actually turn some aspect of your life over to someone because you, for lack of a better word, you give them the benefit of the doubt. You probably actually have to trust them, because at some point your ego is going to freak out and possibly going to say, as mine did at one point, several points, I want out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. Or come up with some kind of thing. Well, this, I'm going to try, I'm going to go back to original Buddhism, Theravadan Buddhism. I've had people come to me and function as a student and then come and even one situation even asked me permission to go and study with a Theravadan teacher. And I say, sure, good luck. Go ahead, study. They're not incorrect. They're just saying, I'm not ready to do this yet. Yes?
How can we stay with something that's coming and going?
See that it's coming and going. That which sees doesn't do anything. The sky doesn't do anything. And there's the worst tsunami in the world will not leave one mark on the sky. Just a metaphor. It only goes so far. Eventually you can go into, well, wait a minute here. How about jet trails? That must last 100 years, relatively speaking. So, you're using relative truth. So you're doing, if you have the understanding of it, then, and you find yourself in a position of teaching people about this, then you will use the relative situation as much as you can to encourage people to train their mind. And it seems that the sitting meditation is very important. The study together as a Sangha, where you're talking about the Lankavatara Sutra, the Samdhinirmachana Sutra, or any of the traditional teachings, the Heart Sutra, you're talking about this and saying and asking each other questions about it and helping the conceptual mind go down and get that ego mind, the self-centered mind, to go down and go through these concepts a few times. So that the ego starts to actually, because the ego loves to think about stuff and wants to know who's right, who's wrong. Do I have it or don't I have it? And so if you're thinking in terms of the concepts, passion, aggression, ignorance, the 12 links in the chain of existence, the 6 realms, the 3 realms, and so on and so forth, then your mind starts to operate in that area, and you will come back to the cushion, you'll come back to the Sangha, you'll come back to these forums. If you were in Japan at the Heiji Monastery, you'd be doing these kind of forums all day long. Yes.
Sometimes it seems like emotions are concepts, and sometimes it feels like emotions are part of the awareness.
Yeah.
Can you talk about
Well, I think they are. I mean, they could be just, the idea is just let them do whatever they need to do. Trungpa Rinpoche talked about emotions as high-speed thinking, or high-speed concept. It's moving so fast that it starts to ruffle our feathers.
So then, in that case, it's included in the awareness, but it's not part of the awareness.
Well, the awareness is like, to use the image, is like a sky, and the thoughts, feelings, emotions, and anything that comes and goes are like the changeable part, the things that come in and leave. And who you actually are is more like a sky. You're here, and things happen. Your body appears in your mind. Your mind doesn't appear in your body. Yes?
So sometimes there's been moments where you'll just have this
Yes.
emotion. You can see, like, you'll just tear
Yeah.
up, and then
No.
it seems like that's coming from a different place than when we're in a interview, and I'll say something's painful, and you'll say, like it's a concept of an emotion. And then sometimes when I see you, it seems like it's an emotion from somewhere else.
Yeah. It's just a pine tree and a donut. There's still something, but they just have different shapes and sizes and the characteristics. I'm not saying it's not helpful to go in and try to sort that out, but the most important thing for you is to stretch your awareness, sit a lot. You already sit a lot. Sit more. Can't. You'll find a way. And I'm following where you're going with that, but I'm also saying, Just look at the space in which those things are occurring rather than the differentiation between the two. You won't be able to see that space. Space can't see itself. Here comes the coffee person. It's probably her coffee, though. No? It's mine. Thank you. Oh, it's water. What a disappointment. On the other hand, it's sparkling water. Now I'm back to being happy again. What a transition. Further question about that? That's worth going into.
People around you,
Okay, now stop right there. Now paraphrase those words. You could say, I'm not saying anything fancy. Others in my life.
others in my life.
Yes. Now paraphrase it again.
What is the struggle that others in your life have when the emotional reaction changes? Why is that so hard?
Yeah, it's because you think, we tend to think, I'm not accusing you of anything, but we tend to think of cause and effect, or I did something, they did something, I didn't do something, they did something, and on and on. And really quite often what happens is when you have an emotion, that's coming out of your situation, but it could be triggered by someone else. This is where the whole idea of blame, we have something that someone has said something and we're having an emotion, and rather than just, respond to the emotion, be responsible. Just respond to the emotion. And it's just emotion is coming and going. Instead, we tend to blame someone else is causing the emotion.
When there's no blame there anymore,
Yes,
it changes the dynamic,
yes.
and you can notice a shift in the relationship.
Yes. And
That's scary because it feels empty.
yeah. Sorry about that. Do it anyway. You'll never regret 1 second that you spend working on this kind of material, expressed in a personal way, the way you've just done. You'll never regret. Keep going. Keep going anyway. Go further. We actually have to transcend what you're just describing. So yeah, it has to be transcended, and that's not something you can do. That's something you are. When that happens, it's like you'll say, nothing has happened. Yes.
Sometimes I feel I'll have a flash of anger or irritation about something, but I don't really blame that thing or that person or the situation that I'm seeing in front of me. Is that just kind of semantical fooling yourself? Can you have anger without having assigning blame?
There's different ways of talking about it. There's anger without hatred.
Right.
You're just angry. You're not really hating anyone or anything or any situation. There's not the warfare kind of thing. I need to stop them, fix that. You're just angry. And then there's the other thing. There's anger without anyone who's angry. So the anger makes it conceptually it's difficult to talk about, but one of the ways of saying that talking about it is saying the anger is just self-existing. It just has its own kind of dynamic within this world of apparent cause and effect. There's no one behind it that is the author. It arises out of causes and conditions, and you know, there are volcanoes and there are seashores. This is a relative world we're in. There are just no separate beings anywhere, including the ants and the uncles. So whatever comes up, you know, be generous with your life. Live your life. Actually, whatever comes up, terrible stuff comes up, you know, give it your attention. Watch it, look at it. It's your treasure. It's your life. You're actually alive. You're a living being. Your heart is beating. Your blood is flowing. You're breathing. You're here. You're walking down the street and you're having these emotions. Be generous. Give your attention to everything that's happening. It looks like something else, and you'll start getting it all back because it was never yours to give in the first place. Fancy words for a simple situation. A simple way of putting it that my teacher used to say all the time is be genuine. He didn't bother to say, be the ass that you are, which is kind of what he was saying. It took me a couple decades to get that. Just be a dork. I mean, if you're feeling you keep trying to not be a certain way, saying just be that and actually see that that's where you save all beings. That you realize that who you are fundamentally, that you're resonating on a level with all beings everywhere. People are suffering terribly. We watch the news for a few minutes, it's about impossible to watch it because it's so painful. But they're resonating with other people's emotions doesn't mean that they are your emotions, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're their emotions. They're just emotions. They're just intense feelings of hope and fear and passion, aggression, ignorance.
So, people who are close to us, people who,
Yeah.
children, parents, spouses,
Yes.
when emotions, chaos, craziness comes up, and the desire is to be the remedy, to come up with the solution, to save it, to fix it.
Yes.
How is what do you how do you behave?
Go take a nap.
Yeah.
Settle down. I understand. I don't happen to be that style. So I'm learning to be more that way. We talked about that a little earlier. You know, you started out wanting to be a nurse, wanting to help. And a lot of people start out with that idea of wanting to, the world is suffering, I want to help. But there's a lot of self-centeredness goes on there where we want to be the helper person. So it's more about our identity of wanting to be a helper than fundamentally helping. Fundamentally helping is to see that there isn't anyone. This is called compassion. Karuna. Yes, go ahead.
So to just stay in the presence of that and not meddle, not say anything, not.
Well, you could start out that way. I mean, you could start out by just, if you've been running your mouth every time somebody has a problem and you want to let them know how much you care, and I felt that way, and I know what that's like. And,
I know what you should do.
I know what you should do. I've been there too. This is here, let me write you. Here.
Mm-hmm.
There's your script. I mean, there's just so many, there's that. And I'm not saying not to do that, but just be aware of what that feels like to want, and then, you know, keep a little bit of attention on that to kind of get an idea. Use it as an awareness practice just to see, to further explore what your intention and what your motivations are with that. Because quite often the motivation is about securing a helper identity. Mm-hmm. I'm the person who helps others. Sometimes it's blatant. We hear people just almost brag about how much they help others.
Family is harder.
Well, it's impossible. It's impossible. I have families, lots of families. The Sangha is challenging. I couldn't do this, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, I was trying because I've been around Sanghas for decades, but it's very, very difficult. Any kind of group of people anywhere there, even if you all are trying to do the same situation, still people's understanding and difference and opinions about that are so incredibly different that we sometimes, even though this person is just as sincere, you know, I see this at the monastery all the time with people who are practice residents who live there and are practicing this every day. People's interpretation of what somebody else's spiritual practice is. You know, they're not here and they're not sitting. And the schedule says. It's very difficult to be in there sitting and following the schedule and see some other asshole, you know, getting up and going out and fixing coffee and wandering down the road whistling. Chirp, chirp. But this is their way, and I'm not letting anybody off any kind of proverbial hook. I'm just saying this is their way of relating to the practice. So even though the person is really disciplined, another person doesn't function that way. Just like the same thing with the forms. Doing the forms, this is why these are here, so you can come in and you can, some people are, you know, I call them form Nazis, you know, it's got to be exactly right. And other people are kind of, you know, why is this so, this doesn't have to be this, that's doesn't have to be that. So, and in terms of family, though, I would say stay in your senses, especially the first 5. Stay. How does this feel? How does when you're listening to someone and going through their, I mean this only descriptively, their melodrama, you know, they're going through something like that, participate in that situation in a feeling level. You feel it. You may be magnetized to come in and try to pacify it. But you also may see that you really don't have actual permission for that. They're just showing up in front of you with difficulty. And you could be there and watch, look at them, watch. Battery is low on that. So, and you could, you know, be aware of your own body posture. Someone else is doing their talking and everything. Be aware of when you move your hand from here to there. Bring some awareness. I'm not saying starve the awareness that's thinking and emoting and feeling and worrying and all that. But I'm saying take some of that awareness and bring it into what we call present moment. This is not this from here to there. That's in the present. Your mind is everywhere. Just the nature of the mind is to not have it doesn't have a space-time orientation. Have you noticed? You notice the mind is everywhere. It's in the past, it's in the future. It's, you know, especially if you go to sleep, if the body goes to sleep, then we have no idea what's going on. We dream in the past, we dream we're somebody else. We dream that somebody else is somebody else, and then those guys are somebody else. And it just goes on and on. Gee, I didn't notice a thing. And that was moved. So here again, it's about encouraging, as I'm sure you're all hearing me say over and over, it's about the awareness of it, not what happens in it. Bring the awareness. The awareness is compassion, like you were talking about, just the awareness. But then the ego mind comes in and says, well, this can't be, I'm not feeling anything. So awareness is not feeling. I mean, the compassion is not feeling. Feeling is more on a lower level of feeling empathy. I'm not saying we won't have it. Sure, we're going to have maybe we're going to be overwhelmed by it. Sometimes I have so much emotion I can't hardly stand up. But it's not. You saw some of that. It's not like sadness. It's just intense feeling coming in. It doesn't belong to anyone. Sometimes it knocks me right off my feet, just about. But I don't attribute that to anything. I don't do anything with anything that happens to me. I don't, if I can. I'm not so much saying I don't shake my fist at traffic. Do I do that? Sometimes do I yell at traffic? But you can. You're actually free to be who you are. You're free to be. You don't need to show up. I don't need to show up as some kind of enlightened guy. If you see me go out here yelling at somebody about something, it could happen. Probably won't. I don't do too much blaming. A little bit. But even if I do, I don't have second opinions on what I'm doing and who I am. There really isn't. Trungpa Rinpoche used to talk about this in a certain way that kind of confused me for a long time. He used to say, listening to me is like listening to a dead man. So I necessarily maybe can't say the same thing, but listening to me is like listening to a voice that there's no identity behind it. There's There's no concern over whether you like what I'm saying or don't like what I'm saying. I know that the causes and conditions that arise as you and as me will come together, and there'll be a dance or there won't be. So I do my very best to help, and based on what I understand. But the emptiness or the lack of a performance situation, which is what you're dealing with there, the lack of not really feeling anything. So this is in 20th century existentialist people like Camus and Sartre and Kierkegaard. They would have a problem with that. They would have difficulty with, wait a minute, I'm feeling, what do they call that? Huh? Yeah, I think it's more with an sound though. Could you correct yourself? Go ahead.
Onks.
Yeah. Angst. So you'd have that, and then you'd have, that's the difficulty with that kind of thing, is they're still caught up in the thought patterns. Whereas we, as meditators, we're emphasizing the awareness part of it rather than the thoughts or the forms that arise in it. It takes a while to, you could say, kind of, it's not really a disconnecting, it's more of a seeing that they don't have to be connected. You don't have to necessarily think about everything that happens. So you're without complimenting you, which I would never do, but I'm saying that kind of emptiness is actually it's a quality that it begins to arise out of the path, out of sitting and doing the sitting meditation, and becoming more and more, use the relative term, more and more objective about everything. Just seeing that things are just like they are. We don't have to, if somebody's maybe having a lot of difficulty, the most helpful thing that might happen might come out of the space of being present. And I would say, trust yourself. If emptiness comes up and just no particular comment comes up, trust that. It's genuine. You're just there, you're just present. And in that kind of space, if something does need to be done, your awareness is so broad because it's not all involved in some kind of emotional caretaking. Your awareness, you're there. You're present, you're watching what's happening. You know, there might be something arising there in terms of some kind of sympathy or something with it. But that's really not what that situation is. It's not something that's going to help that situation. What would really fundamentally be of help in the sense is to be present. And that might be probably what ego, self-centeredness is seeing as this kind of empty, I don't feel anything commentary. More? Is what I've said connect with you in some way? Okay. Yeah, so just trust yourself. Sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha, always Buddha. Might be happy, might be sad, always, nothing happens.
Regarding being genuine and trusting oneself,
Mm-hmm.
and you were giving an example of how you are with the world. You're just coming forward, and you're not caring about what other people think about it or whatever.
It might be some, but
Well,
there's no way to nail it down and say.
Just being very free and just coming forward.
Yeah,
in the
okay, well,
moment.
I'll go with that.
But you are a teacher, and you've studied a long time. For us, for myself to do it, there is that fine line of being genuine and trusting myself, and at the same time being afraid that I'm just indulging ego. Like, how do I know if I'm being my genuine self, no self,
Oh.
or just the ego?
Who's your teacher?
You are.
You sure of that? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Are you ready for me to respond to what you just said?
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Sit a lot. Stretch the awareness. What's arising in your awareness is exactly what needs to happen. The confusion, the insecurity, the should I or shouldn't I, is this really genuine? All that's supposed to happen. It's just leaves falling from trees. It's just weather. It's ego weather. Don't be concerned yourself. Stretch the awareness. Sit down. Strengthen the witnessing part of the mind. Seeing what happens. And eventually there will be a change of allegiance. And it can be very subtle. It can happen like dew forming on leaves. I don't mean to be poetic here. But it's like that. It's very subtle like no boundary, just slowly there's a change in allegiance over from what is arising in the consciousness, the forms, feelings, projections, memories. You don't get rid of them. Your allegiance changes over so you become the sky instead of the clouds. Or you see always them in the sky. But that's why when you say nothing happens, because it's always been the case. You can, even if this body disappears, it doesn't change. Yes? More?
I'm good, thank you.
Is awareness the vehicle?
I'm about to change your name, because it just came up.
Yay.
It's not yay. Oh, that'd be a good name. Go ahead, I'm sorry to interrupt your chain of thinking.
That's okay. Is awareness the vehicle to realization?
Yes. Because what you're doing is by sitting, you're emphasizing the the witnessing, the seeing, because there's not much happening. When you sit and look at a wall, it's pretty boring. So you're voluntarily kind of putting yourself in a not very entertaining situation of, oh what is this about? Oh, when are they gonna hit the bell? Come on. I know it's been an hour. It's like, we've all been through that if you've done any meditating at all. And so by doing that, what's being emphasized is that invisible aspect of the mind, that invisible muscle, is the one that actually begins to include in your, as I said about your allegiance, you're starting to, the identity, instead of going into what we call the seventh consciousness of self-pride, self-delusion, and so on, is to see identify or change over to the space in which that occurs, which we've been there all the time. So it isn't like it's anything new. So yes, it's the path, so more awareness, more awareness. Eventually there's a revolution at the basis of consciousness, as it's described in the Yogacara tradition. I don't know if anything happens, but it's a way of talking about it. Just, there used to be all this stuff, and all of a sudden there's nothing is separating. And so therefore there's no warfare. Even warfare isn't war. You see that it's just beings, consciousnesses, who are grasping into self and are at war with each other. So the only thing that arises is compassion. Or as Rushin said, space. Space and compassion are not separate. Separated by concepts.
When you realize that, does the awareness change?
It kind of goes away. There's no longer, the beginning part is just like we use the metaphor of the space and the cloud, but eventually everything, including the awareness, is included. So there's no two things anywhere. There's awareness is not separate. What arises in the awareness is like the sky and the clouds are not separate anymore. They never were, but we had to separate them for a while in order to have the understanding, so that when they come back together, there's no longer.
Is that confusing?
Yeah, it is. And so confusing is, you don't have to get rid of the confusion. Include it, include everything, include the confusion. Just return to the cushion, return. Time, set up a time, set up a schedule so you do it as much as possible. That's why we have a monastery. Because people that come and sit, the people that live there would probably not do that on their own. It's difficult to sit for long periods of time. We feel like we're wasting our time. We should be doing something constructive. Maybe we should, I don't know.
So how do you deal with someone when you want to just come forward and just be genuine, but the health of your relationship is based on their perception of you?
Okay, say that again, but paraphrase it. Say it in a different
Okay, I
way.
can give you an example of it.
I'd rather have you paraphrase.
Okay. How do you continue being genuine to yourself with someone who is only looking at their own perception?
You're already doing that.
So how do you deal with the temptation to then manipulate that so that you don't feel conflict with them?
You're already doing it. You're doing it. You don't have to change a thing. Sit a lot. And if I felt there was something that needed pushing or shoving, I would, but I don't see that. It's just that it's difficult because it's a path quality. You're actually going through a passage. You're going through a particular aspect, a particular part of the terrain called your life. The causes and conditions are, an image I use all the time is if you see the mouth of the Amazon, it's one thing, the mouth of the Amazon. But where did it come from? Uncountable numbers of tributaries going back and forth, all down through the little tiny trails of water. It's the same thing with your life. My life, your life, anyone's life. And so it's a matter of living it. There's nothing to correct. Wasn't that easy?
Great.
All right. Howdy doody.
What about our most personal relationships? And
That's what she's talking about.
I know, I guess I'm dovetailing on that. When you're really walking that fine line of being, well, not walking the fine line, but considering the factors of wanting to be genuine,
Yes.
wanting to facilitate a sense of intimacy, wanting to keep the peace, not go to war.
So less is better. When I say less is better, I'm saying less. I sometimes say to people who want to, say, shouldn't we go out into the world and join with this group or that group that, basically are more closer to some kind of sanity than some of the other groups of people. You need to get out and do this, and the world is coming apart, and you need to join this movement or that movement. And I say don't do anything unless you have to. And I'm not saying that the people who are doing all kinds of things, including people who are in a simple way in your structure of your house or your family, or aren't doing this or that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that it seems that if you function, go out and move into your world with your voice, with your language, with your body language, and everything that is going, and your politics, your philosophy, your ideas, unless there's clarity here, wherever you want to look, unless there's some kind of really deep understanding here, then any confusion that is happening with you that is actually your project for this lifetime, that you will actually project that out onto the world, and you will actually go to war with your own unexamined aggression. It's called duality. There's only this, but it's difficult to realize. So I'm not saying you shouldn't join a movement or something. I'm not trying to deny that to anyone. I'm just saying less is better. Train your mind, and so that if you do step out into that kind of, shall we say, arena, that you're going there with a lot of openness and a lot of clarity, and basically at least maybe you're not totally resolved in a fundamental level. Maybe there's still some aggression going on, but you're actually seeing it and you're responsible for your aggression, rather than you're shutting down that and waiting for something out there to trigger it that you can blame. More?
I guess though, and I understand what you're saying as far as in the world, the big world, but just one-on-one, like your partner, your best friend, especially if you're dealing with big emotional situations,
Okay, let me do it this way. Something that we do at monastery is we have, I don't know, how many people are living there now? 7 people. And several of them are in relationships with each other. When they have some difficulty, sometimes they come in together, and several times we've done this where I try to help people work with communication situations, however they're happening. But I also encourage them to, if they're getting in a situation where they feel like the person you're with is not understanding and the tendency to project onto others gets confusing, I say, sit down, sit across from each other, look at each other. You can even bow to each other so that you're returning to your original inspiration to even be together in the first place. So you're coming back to some kind of heart-to-heart level, and spend even, you could spend 30 seconds or a minute timing if you need to. Start it with a bell. Do it so it's a very formal structure, so that all of the, and if your partner won't do that with you, we're not asking them to become a Buddhist, we're just talking about awareness. If they won't do that, then, then some of their ideas are kind of suspect to what's going on with them. But if there's some sincerity, well, yeah, I'll sit down and talk to you. Then there's some kind of feeling like they want to connect with you on a, like you say, intimate level. Sit down and then look in each other's eyes for a minute. That's a long time to look in somebody's eyes. Look in somebody's eyes and feel this, how you are with this person. And then you could begin to say, so what would you like to say about this? What would you, and it seems to kind of wind down and get more, almost by itself comes down to the basic situation that is. And then you might find that person really, understands what you're saying. If it's too much leaning on the counter or the cup of coffee and pacing back and forth and talking over the kitchen sink and like that, the body mind are really not separate. So in order to, kind of find what's up with the mind, to actually hold the body very still in a symmetry is important. And so just, you don't necessarily have to do this hand mudra, but you could just be symmetrical, and then you could talk. I've had people come back and say that was very important to them, and it's helped people actually continue to work together and understand each other in a deeper way. Of course, these people are people who meditate a lot. So with someone who is not meditating, it might be more challenging, but not impossible. Sometimes you actually, and this is not a way of saying you have to do it for somebody, but sometimes you actually, because we're not separate, because we're fundamentally not separate, when you sit still, the other person sits still. When you talk, the other person listens. When they talk, then you listen. And you actually, without any credential being involved, you're actually meditating that person. They're not separate, fundamentally. More.
No, thank you.
Try that. Try that as a, well, let's see what happens here, without any mention of meditation or Buddhism or anything. Just, I just really want to talk to you. Let's try this. Let's just sit and look at each other and try to heart, see. The original inspiration seems to be a kind of a nice concept to use, because that's why you're with somebody, is because what little spark that was back there somewhere.
No.
Anything? All right. I made myself perfectly clear then. Anything? Goes on? So, I'll give another talk this afternoon sometime, about 3 or 4 o'clock.
Break at 3:50 and then.
Okay. And so what will we do now? It's 20 to 12, sit some more? Or,
Yeah, maybe we could stop this and we were going to talk about
okay.
the
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have a little battery here, sweetheart.